Hi guys, welcome back to Flower Class with Helen Olivia. My name is Madison and I'm teaching today's workshop. We have a very fun class planned, really unique color palette. So I think we are really gonna make something really unique and beautiful. So the color palette we're working with today is what we like to call like a brownie color palette. So it has brown tones, it has mauve tones, it has like muted sand tones, all of which are going to marry together really beautifully. We're also using a kind of unique shaped vessel for our design today. So if you've taken class with us in the past, this is going to be a slightly different design as far as shape and kind of composition as well. So I think we're going to have a lot of fun and make something really beautiful that hopefully you can enjoy for at least a week and beyond. As far as tools go today, I'm using a pair of clippers, also going to be using a knife just purely for demonstration purposes. So either of these tools are excellent. Anything you might use in your garden, so any type of like pruning shears are great for flowers. And then as far as a knife goes, you can use just like a sharp kitchen knife, just make sure that it has a smooth edge rather than a serrated edge. We are going to be incorporating fresh flowers as well as some dried elements today to kind of introduce some interesting texture into this design. So all of my dried elements, we have some bleached ruscus, we have some bunny tails, and then we also have some fan palm. I'm putting those off to the side, and they would have been inside of your bag in addition to this boat base. So if you haven't already done so, you're going to want to go ahead and fill this. It's about 1.5 inches below the baseline. You'll see that there's this wire mesh inside of the vase. That is a grid that's going to help to create some support in this design. And then we've used a tape grid around basically just to keep that wire inside. It's an odd shaped vase, so it's really easy for the mesh to just kind of pop out. Excuse me. So our tape grid is anchoring that in place. All right, so when we're using a unique shaped vase like this, you kind of want to embrace the shape of the vase and then carry that into the actual floral design as well. So oftentimes when we're designing in like a circular or square vase, you're kind of just working up from here. When you're working in a long vase, you kind of want to extend the plane of your design this way and carry out the length of the vase into your flowers. So I'll kind of show you guys how we will go about doing that, but just keep that in mind. So your actual design itself is not going to kind of just sit on top of the vase. It's really going to expand out to the sides, and we will just really embrace the shape of the vase and kind of carry that out into the actual floral elements. So the first thing I'm going to go ahead and grab out of my bucket is my little leaf pit. So this is a variegated greenery, which means that it's two tones. So you'll see it has green with like cream tips to it. Love a variegated foliage because it's going to just make it look a little bit more complex. It'll give you some nice interest in as far as the coloring of the arrangement goes. I am super fond of this little leaf pit because it's really dense. So you can see there's lots and lots of little leaves, but it's not overwhelming. So it's really subtle in a design, especially one where we're gonna have some smaller, daintier elements. This greenery will just kind of really complement that and not overwhelm the actual flowers, which we love. So we've got 2 pieces. You may have 3 pieces depending on how lush your actual greenery is, but I'm going to use these to really get some of that length that we were discussing. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kind of just pinch my stem right where the green kind of stops. So you'll see that all of the greens kind of collected like this, and I'm just going to kind of pinch my stem underneath that. I'm then going to hold that up to the edge of my vase on one side. So this side or this side doesn't really matter at this point. I'm just going to kind of hold my fingers right on the edge there. And then using my clippers, I'm going to go ahead and snip my stem where it looks like it's going to hit the bottom of the vase. So that's going to be how we're kind of determining how long to keep our stems in this design. And then I'm going to take this and I'm going to thread it into my boat here. And you'll see it kind of just is going to sit on the edge here. And you can orient it if you want it to be like a little bit more upright. It doesn't have to be laying super flat like that. All right, so piece number 2, we're going to do the same thing, just kind of holding where my greens end, can hold that up next to my vase. And in this case, really requires very little snippage. My stem is pretty short. And then I'm going to go ahead and get one piece of this greenery on the opposite side of the base, like so. So you'll see that one of my pieces is a little bit closer to my baseline, like so, and then this other piece is kind of creeping up a little bit. So I like that asymmetrical look where we're going to be very sprawling, but not necessarily just sprawling like this. We're going to get a little bit of height and dimension over here. All right. So ordinarily, I would say we probably wouldn't necessarily jump to our dried floral next, but the ruscus that we're using is a really beautiful shape as well. And we can use it we can incorporate it to really get those beautiful lines in our piece as well. So we have our piece of little leaf pit that's really trailing up like this. And I'm going to go ahead and thread one of my pieces of ruscus kind of underneath that, like so. There we go. And then we can get one of our pieces of ruscus on the opposite side, kind of filling out the space between these two pieces. So we can use the same technique, just holding it up where we might like it to be in our design, giving it a nice snip, and then this guy we can kind of peek in right here. And I may even do just a smidge shorter of some. Okay. Like so. All right, amazing. If you feel like this piece over here is really aggressive, you always have the option to kind of cut some of it away and then pop it in a little bit closer. I kind of like the drama of how this looks, so I'm gonna leave it like that, but you totally have the option to kind of trim it down if you feel like it's a little bit too aggressive. But yeah, I may even, one more little snip just to get this guy in here nice and snug. All right, there we go. Okay, so with this particular piece, I'm going to kind of consider it to be three-sided. So there'll be a definite back to my design. So the majority of my floral is going to be kind of situated around the front here, and then the back side will be filled out, but it's not going to be quite as beautiful as the front side. All right, so I'm actually going to go ahead and incorporate this fan come in now, kind of envisioning it's like a little bit of a backdrop for my design. So I like it a little bit lower than this peak piece of pit over here. And I'm just going to kind of orient it. I'm not going to go straight up and down like this. I want to orient it off to one side. So it could be this side, could be this side. I think it's going to be a little bit more visible on this side. So I'm going to go over here, and then I can nestle this fan palm in like so. All right. Now we're going to go ahead and grab for our baby's breath. So baby's breath is not a flower that we traditionally use in our designs at Helen Olivia, but it is one of the flowers, in addition to some of the other blooms that we're going to be using, that does a beautiful job picking up other colors when you put colors into the water that it's drinking from. So what I mean by that is you can, what they've done here is they've actually just colored the water that the baby's breath was hydrating in, and the flower drank that water up, and the coloring went into the flower's veins, and then you'll see it's kind of picked up in the actual flower itself. So that's just, there are not a ton of flowers that do that really well, but baby's breath is one of them. And also the texture of this is going to be really light and airy, kind of similar to a lot of the other elements that we're using. So I think it's just really beautiful paired along with the things that we are that we're working with today. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get one of these pieces kind of up front here just to fill it out a bit. So we have a lot going this way and this way, but we don't really have much coming towards you. So in order to introduce dimension into that part of the design, I'm going to go ahead and get some of this baby's breath kind of up front here, coming out of the front. There we go. We've got quite a bit of it, so that's nice here. I'm going to go ahead and get a second piece of it. You can actually, in some cases, you'll see that there's a nice like joint where you can actually cut a single piece into two pieces. So here I have like an arm coming out over here, and then I have a big arm up here. I'm gonna cut off this big arm, and then you can spread this a little bit more in the design. So I've got one kind of coming out here. I'm gonna go ahead and get a piece on this side over here. So it could be in front of your ruscus if you'd like it to be. It could be behind your ruscus, whatever you'd like. Maybe I'll go ahead and go in front of my ruscus. So I'm gonna kind of just nestle this guy in over here, like so. And then I'm gonna pop a few of these last pieces that I have left into the back here. So I do want it to, I don't want you to be able to like see through my design. I do want there to be some filling on the back. So I'm gonna get a couple pieces like pretty snug. I'll show you guys what that looks like. I'm just gonna pop them in first. So then I'll turn my base so you can see. But this is just gonna kind of keep it from looking like you can see right through the design. But I just cut a few pieces of this baby's breath a little bit shorter, and then used it to fill in the back there. All right, so now we've got kind of like a nice shape going. Let's go ahead and next pull out our roses. So we are using two different varieties of roses today. We're using your Playa Blanca and then also my absolute favorite variety, a quicksand. So your Playa Blanca is white. Your quicksand is this beautiful sand, pinky sand color. So super, super popular in the wedding world. The wonderful thing about this particular variety is there's a lot of variation in a single bunch of flowers. So you may have some that look really very blush pink. You may have some that are very sandy. You may have some that are almost like just the faintest bit of pink to it. So really fun variety. One of my absolute favorites. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and clean up each of our stems. We'll clean up both rose varieties together. So first step is to just remove any leaves along the length of your stem. If we did have any thorns, the next step would be to either use our clippers and just snip them right off, or you can run the sharp side of your edge like against those thorns, and they'll just kind of pop off pretty easily. Step number 2, we're going to remove guard petals. So your guard petals are anything around the outside of the flower that may be bruised, tattered, or torn. They tend to show the damage most of any of the petals because they were on the outside of the flower as it was developing. So when the bud was, or the flower was just a tiny bud on the bush, these outside petals were helping to protect the bloom from all kinds of different things like wind, rain, hands as being harvested, etc. So we're going to go ahead and just pop off any damaged petals around the outside of the flower. They tend to be more obvious on your whites, so don't feel like, I really will pull off anything that has like any bruising on it, and then you can give your flower a puff of fresh air, and that will help to kind of fill out what you might have otherwise removed. So I'm going to just take a look at each of my blooms, pulling off any damaged petals as well as any leaves. And then we can give our stems a puff of warm air. So the warm air is just kind of mimicking warmth that the flower would get from the sun. So as it's out in the sun, that's kind of when the flower unfolds. So that warm air really helps to works inside those petals to really break it up a little bit and get things moving. Lucky for us, we don't seem to have any thorns on these particular bunches, so that's great. But just be careful if you do have any petal or thorns, you can go ahead and just remove those as well. They tend to get caught on other flowers as you're sliding them into the design, so best to just remove them off the bat so that you can really easily slide the stems into the arrangement. Okay, all right, so step 2, once we've got our roses cleaned up, we're gonna go ahead and put them into some groupings so that we can make sure that the colors are kind of spread all throughout the design. So today I'm going to do a grouping of 2 quicksands and 1 white. So I'm just creating little piles. So I've got 2 quicksands, 1 white. I have a quicksand and a white. another pile of a quicksand and a white, and then one that's just a single quicksand. All right, so the goal here is that basically we want this design to, I don't want all of my roses to be clustered in one area. I really want them to be kind of spread and be really intentional with that placement so that we can see each of the different types of flowers kind of represented on all sides of the design. So let's go ahead and start with our grouping of 3. I'm gonna go ahead and start with my quicksand first. And we're going to use the same technique. I'm going to hold my rose up where I might like it to be in my design. In this case, I'm going to go just a little bit below where my fan palm is. And then using my clippers, I can clip this down where it looks like it's going to hit the bottom of the vase. All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and thread this guy into the design grid like so. And you'll see that I'm kind of having him lean a little bit forward because again, this is going to be pretty much the front of our vase. And I'm going to just snip this just a smidge. Like so. There we go. All right, rose number 2 will be my white. And I want to get this guy kind of nice and right about here in my design. So I'm going to hold him here. Can give him a nice snip where he looks like he's going to hit the bottom of the vase. And then I can go ahead and thread this guy into front here, pretty close to my baseline. So you actually, and as what I'm finding I need to do too, because the vase is really long, but it's very narrow, you may actually find that you want to snip it down just a little bit more. So I just cut off like an extra inch. And then that way I can get it kind of right close to my baseline like I wanted. All right, and then the last rose is going to be kind of right hovering down here. So I'll take my last quicksand in that bundle, can hold it up here. I'm going to cut it just a little bit shorter than it looks like it's going to hit the bottom of the vase, maybe even a little bit more. And then this guy we can kind of nestle in right there. So we've got a beautiful pairing of 3 here. If we look at mine from this side, you can see that there's a little bit of dimension there. So I don't have them lying all like flat at the same length. One of my roses is going to be a little bit extended beyond the rest. That's just going to give me dimension. I don't want it to look super flat. Like it's only coming this way, and I really want it to look 3D, so it's going to be coming towards you as well if you're viewing the design there. All right, our next pocket of roses, I'm going to do like, let's see here. How do I want to orient this? So what I usually do not do is do a lot of planning before I start teaching, because then the design itself can start to look really boring. Usually I'll just act as though I'm designing as I would in the studio. So we will kind of play with some placement here, but I'm thinking I'm going to get my second grouping of roses. It'll just be a grouping of 2 kind of over in this area here. So let's go ahead and start with our white on top. So I'm going to kind of get this white right here. Like so. And even go a little bit more forward if I want to. There we go. And then my second rose, I'm going to get behind that. So again, I don't want this to be a see-through design. I want there to be some amount of floral on the back, even though this side isn't going to be quite as pretty. So I want to get this guy back here behind that white I just placed. So my second rose is going to be nestled in right about there. All right, heading back to the front here. Here we go. My next grouping, I'm going to do 1 rose kind of over here. So let's do this as our single quicksand. So this guy, I'm going to kind of have him hovering right in front of this fan palm here. Give it a nice snip, and then I'm going to pop him in right about there. All right, beautiful. And our last 2, I'm going to go ahead and do on the back side. So I'll turn so you guys can see. I have a ton of open real estate here, so I'm going to go ahead and get my first rose. Can be either color, whichever you would prefer. I'm going to go ahead and start with my white, and I'm going to go ahead and get this guy like so. And then my next one will be a little bit lower than that. this. Even a smidge shorter than that. There we go, perfect. All right, transitioning back to our the front side of our design. I'm going to go ahead and we are going to pop in our spray roses next, but before we do that, I do want to get this last piece of dried ruscus in. So for my particular piece, there's a big collection of ruscus up top, and then I still have a couple pieces low lying, but there's a big separation between the two pieces. If your last piece happens to be like that, you can actually cut this in half. So I can do 1 and 2 as separate pieces. They may all be clustered together, like how it was with my first 2 pieces, in which case just leave it as 1 piece. But I'm gonna kind of have this, I really want to extend my design a little bit out farther this way. So I'm going to pop that next piece of ruscus kind of over here. And then if you happen to have a second piece, you can go ahead and just kind of thread it into the back of your design so that you do want there to be a little bit of ruscus on both sides. So even though this is not my more beautiful side, I do want there to be just like a smidge of ruscus back here. All right, looking awesome. Next up, we're gonna go for our Ivory Majolica spray roses. So these are my favorite spray rose color as well. Similar to our quicksands, they tend to have a lot of variation as far as color as well. So oftentimes they'll be this beautiful ivory color. Sometimes they'll have like a hint of blush to them, but the most beautiful thing about them is the core of the flower. So the stamen that are in the center are this beautiful kind of yellowy color. So you may not be able to see them now, like this case, but as they start to open up a little bit more, you can kind of see them a little bit more in here. You can see more of that innard. And as your roses start to unfurl a little bit more, you'll see that beautiful core there. I just realized that I have more Playa Blancas than I thought I did. So for these last roses, I'm actually just I had 2 more than I thought. I'm gonna go ahead and pop them into the back of my design where I don't have much going. So my first one, I'm going to go back here behind my fan palm. So I'm gonna snuggle this guy back here. And then my second one, maybe I'll go a little bit in front of that quicksand in front. Okay, beautiful. All right, so we have 4 of our Ivory Majolica spray roses. We're gonna do the same as before, where we remove all of the leaves on the stem, and then we can remove any guard petals. These tend to have less guard petals, so you shouldn't have too much to take away, but we can go ahead and just clean each of our stems up. Removing any guard petals and then any leaves. So you may have stems that look like this. I have a piece where all of my blooms are kind of all together in one little plane up top. You may also have stems that look like this, which is a little bit more unruly. In this case, I have these big line kind of arms on the bottom. I can actually just pull those off and then use that flower separately in the design. And then what's left is a little bit more clustered together. So if you have any big, long-armed pieces on the bottom, you can just pull those off and use them separately. I'm gonna go ahead and get one of these blooms kind of filling the space. I had a pocket of 3 and then I had my grouping of 2 over here. I'm gonna go ahead and get one of the spray roses kind of breaking up the open area behind or between the 2 groupings. So I can hold my stem up between the 2, and then this guy I can kind of just nestle him in. To fill out that area a little bit. And I'm gonna just turn so I can see what this looks like. Okay, looks pretty good. So when I'm designing at the camera, I have really no idea what it looks like beyond the tiny image that I can see in front of me. So I like to just turn so I can make sure that I'm directing you guys well. All right, stem number 2. I'm gonna go ahead and work this in over here below that lowest rose. So for stem number 2, I'm gonna kind of just situate him over here, can give it a nice snip. And then I'm thinking I'm gonna go a little bit more forward just because we focus on getting this front piece of baby's breath over here coming forward, and I want to make sure that there are other elements that are coming forward on this side of the design. Here we go. All right, and then our last roses I'm going to use to make sure that I'm filling in my backside. So right now I can see a lot of my wire still, so I'm gonna cut these guys a little bit lower, and then I'm just gonna use my last 2 spray roses to fill out the backside so it looks complete back here, which is cool. I just don't want it to look, I do want there to be one side that's a little bit more complex looking, but the backside I don't want it to look unfinished. I don't want it to look sloppy or that I just like neglected this side entirely. And then if you happen to have any of these little one-off blooms that you cut off that were little leggy pieces, you can just pop them in wherever you like. So wherever you see fit, you can even nestle them in lower up front. In this case, I'm gonna get a couple down here even. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead next and place our iris. So these are this prettiest color iris. They're the faintest bit of peachy pink, mauve pink, and then the actual leaves themselves have this deep purple kind of hue to them. So I have one that's very open, and then I have one that's a little bit more closed. So for my open one, I think I'm going to kind of place it in this area up here, and then my closed one, I'm thinking I'm going to get a little bit low over here. So as far as balance goes, I want one to be high and one to be low on opposite sides of the design. So I'm going to hold this guy up, give it a nice snip, and then I'm going to nestle him in kind of right in front of that fan palm, but a little bit higher up, like so. So this way, you can see, there's plenty of space for the flower to continue to open. And then as I'm placing my second one, I'm going to make sure that I leave it pretty far out as well, so that there is also space for the bloom to open on this side of the design. So this guy, plenty of options. I think I'm going to go a little bit forward, just like we mentioned before. Having things kind of coming forward will help to give you some dimension there. So that's great. And then next up, let's go for our carnations. So these are really, really, really fun carnations. They're a peach carnation that they put into like a brown coloring as well. So this is going to be like a really rich color as opposed to what we have now, which is more muted and soft. So we've got 3 of these guys, and I'm going to kind of place them. A lot of what we have left is richer, so don't feel like you need to that it's gonna make things too dark by adding this element in. First ones are gonna feel a little bit uncomfortable, but then as we start to add in our tulips and our lisianthus, it's gonna round things out really beautifully. So the first thing I like to do when I'm working with carnations is I like to just gently kind of open up the face of the flower a little bit more. So just kind of gently touching the face of the flower. Generally speaking, we don't like to touch the face of flowers because it will bruise them. Carnations is one of those that will really tolerate it well. So it won't hurt the flower if you are kind of massaging it open a bit. So we've got 3 of these guys. Super, super pretty. I mean, you can also see what I said earlier about the veins sucking up that color. It's really obvious on your carnations and your tulips where the veins kind of are. So if you look closely, you can really see that kind of pattern on the actual petals and where the color was really being soaked up. All right, so we've got 3 of these guys. I'm going to begin by just removing any leaves along the length of the stem. That will make it easier to get our stems into the arrangement. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and I think I'm gonna go ahead and get one pop of, so I feel like there's not too much dimension or depth here. I wanna get something kind of coming out up front to break up some of that white there. So for my first stem, I'm gonna kind of use it to break this bulk of white up in the front of my design. So I'm just gonna kind of work that in. I'm letting it drift a little bit farther out than the rest of my roses so that again, there's some depth there. Carnation number 2, I'm gonna go ahead and introduce a little bit lower over here. So you can give this guy a nice snip. And then I'm going to work my second carnation kind of right out down there. Beautiful. And then number 3, let's go ahead and put one on the back side just in case this is on like a round table and it's going to be seen from the back. I just want to make sure that this color is represented on both sides. So you can pop one into the back of your design. Okay. Cool. All right, beautiful. Okay, so next up we are going to play with our tulips. So tulips are really fun in that they look really beautiful, kind of closed up in their traditional tulip shape. As tulips start to open up a little bit more, and you'll see this especially true of tulips that are outside, they start to kind of unfurl and you can see the inside of the tulip, which I think is really beautiful. So for 2 of my tulips, I'm gonna kind of mimic that look. I'm gonna pull away my bottom leaf and be just careful as you're removing the leaves not to break the stem because you can pretty easily break them off or break the stem. It's very gummy. I like the leaves here because you can see that there's even more of a rich kind of tonal quality to them. So I'm gonna leave them on, but very carefully, and I'll get this kind of close so you guys can see. I am going to ever so slightly just take each petal and reflex it. So just very, very, very gently, I'm going to roll the petal out like that. So working my way around the outside of the bloom, I am going to just ever so slightly manipulate the flower so that it's going to unfurl a little bit. If you get a little rip in one of your petals, totally fine. I wouldn't be super, super worried about it. It won't be very, very obvious because the petals themselves are very stripy. But I'm just slowly working my way around the bloom itself. And then eventually you'll see that you start to see the inside of the flower and you'll see the pollinators in there, which is just also really beautiful. So we've got this. So very, very different. You can take a bloom that looks like this and turn it into this, which it looks really nice and designed to have, I'm gonna do the same to a second bloom. It looks really nice in a design to have both kind of shapes represented. That's going to look really natural because as if you were, growing tulips in your yard or they were growing in the wild, for instance, you would see that. You would see some that are a little bit more tight and then you'd see some that are a little bit more developed and may have opened up a little bit more. So I'm doing the same. I think that the pattern to the leaves is more obvious when it's open, which is why I really especially love to do this to this particular variety. Is actually called a brownie tulip. So I think it looks just really good on this particular variety of tulip. So I've got 2 that are like this. I'm going to start with 2 and then I'll see for my last 3 kind of where I want to, what shape I want to do. Okay, so tulip number 1, I'm thinking, let me just take a look here. We'll look-see at the front. It feels very like void of color kind of right in this area here. So I'm gonna go ahead and pop my first tulip kind of right up front here. And you can let this guy drift a little bit above the rest of the flowers, like so. And then tulip number 2, I think I'm gonna have him coming kind of like pretty, I guess I'd say this is pretty dramatically, kind of behind that fan palm, coming out of the top here, but I'm gonna leave it a little bit farther out. So, looking like so. There we go. And then I'm thinking for the last 3 of these tulips, I want to kind of leave them a little bit tighter. So we've got 1 and 2 here. I'm gonna get 1 up front here, kind of trailing out my design. So I've got 1 of these guys here. I think I'm gonna do this top guy that's really dramatic. I think I'm gonna pair 1 of the tighter ones kind of behind it, nestled in. So that looks really natural as well, to have 2 tulips alongside each other. Maybe one is more open and the other one is just a little bit more snug, like so. So that will be a little pair there, and then I'll probably get 1 back here onto the back side. Like so. All right, and then our last and final element is our brown lisianthus. I absolutely love lisianthus, and I think this color is just really rich and unique and pretty. So we can actually do the same with our lisianthus. You can actually very gently open up the base of the flower as well. So if your lizzie are tight, you can just gently kind of peek them open. We'll remove any stems. And then this guy is gonna be, these ones will be a designer's choice. So wherever you feel like your arrangement could use some deeper hues, I would go ahead and thread some of these guys in. So I don't have much as far as dark flowers over here. So I'm gonna get my lisianthus, the first lisianthus in on this side, like so. And if you have stems like this where you can easily break off some, you can definitely break them into smaller pieces. But yeah, our designs are going to be kind of have taken on different forms on their own. So likely your design doesn't look identical to mine. I would be floored if it did. So I would just take a look at the coloring of your piece, and then see where do I feel like there isn't much of these richer hues. And again, you can definitely unfurl your lisianthus a little bit to let it open up a bit. Okay. And then this last guy, I think I'm going to thread in for me, kind of right around here. All right, your last and final element, really fun, little dried. They're called bunny tails. They look like this. So they're just like a cute little